He shot at police officers, got out on bail, then stole a squad car and with a K9 inside, and opened fire again. This isn't a movie. It's a real story. And it nearly ended in disaster. March 16, 2020. Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. The day began like any other. The sky over Brooklyn Park was dull with an early spring haze, the kind that hovered low and turned parking lot asphalt into a mirror of light. Inside the local Walmart, the midday rush was beginning. Parents shopped for school snacks. Workers grabbed hardware or groceries. No one noticed the man walking through the automatic doors. Derrick Monroe moved with purpose. Tall, lean, and wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his forehead, he pushed a shopping cart that wobbled with every step. To the casual observer, he blended in, just another customer. But store security was already watching him. They had been since he entered. He started in electronics, picked up a small Bluetooth speaker, paid for it in cash at the register. Crisp bills, too crisp maybe. Then he drifted through the aisles, slowly filling his cart. Snacks, batteries, a set of clothes, a duffel bag. And then, something that made security's stomach turn, ammunition. A few boxes at first, then a few more. Rifle rounds, .45 ACP, more than any average shopper would ever need. That's when the call was made. The store's head of security, a man named Dennis, phoned the local police dispatch. "We've got a customer purchasing a suspicious amount of ammunition," he said. "We've got reason to believe he's also involved in shoplifting. He's acting strange." The dispatcher took the information. Officers were already patrolling nearby. At 12:46 p.m., Officer Mark Ellison pulled into the Walmart parking lot. He was calm, even casual. Most calls like this ended with a citation and some paperwork. He called it in. "Show me out at Walmart. Possible retail theft in progress." Officer Rachel Kim arrived moments later as backup. She parked across from the main entrance, kept her eyes scanning the front doors. Inside, Derrick Monroe finished his shopping. He didn't know police were waiting. Or maybe he did. The bags under his eyes were heavy, his body tight with energy. If anyone had looked close, they would have noticed something off, like he was walking on the edge of something. At 12:52 p.m., Derrick pushed his cart past the final register and out the door. Officer Ellison was waiting at the edge of the parking lot, hands resting casually near his belt. "Sir," he called out, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Derrick froze. There was a moment, a single suspended breath where things might have gone differently, where Derrick could have said a few words, answered a few questions, and walked away with a ticket or a court date. Instead, his hand moved fast. He reached into his coat, pulled a pistol, and fired. The crack of the shot echoed across the lot. "Shots fired! Shots fired!" Officer Ellison yelled into his radio as he dove behind a car. Rachel Kim was already sprinting across the lot, drawing her weapon, taking cover. Customers screamed, dropping to the pavement. Store employees slammed shut the automatic doors. Derrick fired again, 2, 3 more shots, and turned to run. Ellison returned fire. One round struck Derrick in the upper shoulder, sending him stumbling. Kim flanked right, moving low, calling out, "Put it down! Drop the weapon!" But Derrick wasn't listening. He lunged toward a nearby vehicle, an SUV idling near the curb. A woman sat behind the wheel, startled by the noise. Derrick yanked open her door. "Out!" he shouted. "Get out!" She screamed, fumbled with the seatbelt. He pointed the gun at her chest. Kim raised her weapon. "Don't do it!" she yelled. Another shot rang out, this one from Ellison. It hit Derrick in the leg. He dropped hard, crashing against the side of the SUV. The woman scrambled out, running toward the store. Ellison and Kim moved in fast, guns drawn, ordering him to show his hands. Derrick was still conscious, blood pooling beneath him, the pistol now lying inches from his fingertips. He didn't reach for it. He didn't speak. Within seconds, handcuffs clicked into place. An ambulance was called. A crowd had gathered near the edge of the lot, phones out, recording. The sun was still high in the sky. And just like that, the chaos began to settle. Inside Derrick's pockets, officers found more ammunition and a second magazine. Later, a full check revealed his record: prior convictions for counterfeiting, illegal possession of firearms, and drug trafficking. He was a felon in possession of a weapon. The charges stacked up fast: assaulting a peace officer, illegal possession of ammunition, attempted carjacking. The woman in the SUV was shaken, but unharmed. So were Officers Ellison and Kim. It could have gone worse. Much worse. Back at the precinct, paperwork filled desks. Officers spoke in low tones about how fast it had all unfolded, how calm he looked at first, how close it had been. Detectives began connecting dots. The ammunition, the method of payment, the erratic behavior. Derrick Monroe had been out of prison for less than a year, and now he was looking at decades behind bars. But no one knew then that this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning. April 2021, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The courtroom was quiet. Just the rustle of papers, the drone of the fluorescent lights, and the weight of silence. Derrick Monroe sat beside his public defender, Lyle Patterson, dressed in a plain county jail jumpsuit. He didn't look like a man who had opened fire on police just a year earlier. He looked calm. Too calm, Detective Elaine Moore thought from the back of the room. She'd worked the case in Brooklyn Park, saw the body cam footage, heard the gunshots. She knew what he was capable of. But the wheels of justice turned slow, and that day they turned in his favor. The judge, under pressure from a backlog of cases and a state already reckoning with questions about bail reform, made the ruling. Bail is granted. Elaine's hands curled into fists as she exhaled sharply. It didn't matter that Derrick Monroe had tried to carjack a woman at gunpoint. Didn't matter that he fired at officers. The court cited delays in proceedings, COVID-era overcrowding in the jail, and a promise from Monroe's attorney that his client was committed to turning his life around. He walked out that afternoon, free. At first, he stayed quiet. No one knew where he went exactly. The address he provided to the court, his aunt's duplex in St. Paul, was empty when officers checked. By the time April turned into May, he was gone. And then, one hot Thursday afternoon, over 1,200 miles away in Utah, he reappeared. It was supposed to be a routine stop. Utah State Trooper Brandon Hayes had been patrolling a long, quiet stretch of highway outside Cedar City when he noticed the black sedan with expired tags. It was weaving slightly, drifting toward the center line. He pulled the car over without urgency, rolled up behind it, ran the plate. Nothing came back. When he approached the driver's side, he immediately felt something wasn't right. The driver, a black male in his mid-30s, had a twitchiness to him. His voice calm, but his eyes moved fast. Next to him sat a woman, early 20s, Hispanic, long black hair, arms crossed tight. She wouldn't look up, wouldn't speak. "License and registration, please," Hayes said. The man passed him an ID. Derrick Monroe. The photo looked old. Something about it was off. "You from around here, Mr. Monroe?" "Just passing through. Vacation," Derrick said. Hayes glanced toward the back seat, empty. But something about the way the car rode low made him suspicious. Within minutes, Hayes called for backup. Another unit began heading his way. While waiting, he asked Derrick to step out. The man did so, hands in plain sight, calm. Hayes ran the ID through dispatch. The system was slow. He still had no idea this man was out on bail for shooting at police in another state. The cross-referencing hadn't pinged. Yet. As protocol, Hayes had Derrick sit in the front seat of his cruiser during the search, something he'd done dozens of times before without issue. Derrick wasn't handcuffed. That decision would change everything. Hayes turned his attention to the black sedan. The woman, Vanessa Cruz, stepped out reluctantly, said little. A quick sweep of the vehicle turned serious when Hayes opened the trunk. A heavy duffel bag. Inside, nearly 9 pounds of methamphetamine, tightly packed and vacuum-sealed. Moments later, he found the handgun tucked beneath the driver's seat, a 9mm pistol, loaded. Hayes' heart rate spiked. He radioed it in. "Got a situation. Narcotics and weapon located. Requesting immediate backup." That's when he turned to walk back to his squad car. That's when it all fell apart. Derrick Monroe had been watching him through the rearview mirror. He saw the trooper's shoulders tense, saw the call go out, knew the clock was ticking. He moved fast. Sliding across the seat, he reached for the gear shift. The cruiser engine was already running. By the time Hayes turned around, Derrick had already locked the doors and thrown the car into drive. "He's taking off!" Hayes shouted, pounding the hood as the cruiser screeched away in a cloud of gravel. But it wasn't just any squad car. It was a K9 unit. And inside the back, Officer Hayes' partner, a police dog named Bravo. Trooper Hayes leapt into the second officer's vehicle as he arrived on scene. "He's got the dog and my rifle." That's when it hit him. The rifle. Each K9 unit cruiser was outfitted with standard equipment. In the lockbox between the seats, an AR-15 patrol rifle, department issued. And now Derrick had it. Within minutes, a multi-agency pursuit began. Alerts went out to every department in the surrounding counties. A man with a violent record, high on adrenaline, armed with an assault rifle, and driving a stolen police vehicle with a K9 inside. That was every department's nightmare scenario. The blacktop shimmered with heat as officers tried to keep eyes on the vehicle. Inside the cruiser, Derrick gripped the wheel with both hands, eyes wide. His breathing was fast and shallow. He didn't know where he was headed, just that he wasn't stopping. In the back seat, Bravo barked and scratched against the cage divider, the sounds echoing through the cabin. Derrick glanced back once. "I didn't mean for it to go like this," he muttered, as if the dog could hear him. In dispatch centers across southern Utah, phones lit up. "He's heading southbound on 202, approaching Richfield." Sergeant Julian Beck, a 20-year veteran of the Utah Highway Patrol, took command. "Don't box him in yet," he told his team. "Let's find a safe place, somewhere with minimal traffic." But they all knew this was no longer a routine chase. Derrick had already proved once that he was willing to shoot. Now, with a rifle in the seat next to him and a K9 pacing in the back, the stakes had climbed even higher. And the worst was yet to come. The sun blazed over the Utah Desert Highway, casting long mirages across the blacktop. The stolen cruiser sped southward, kicking up heat and tension in equal measure. Behind the wheel, Derrick Monroe gripped the steering wheel with slick hands, his jaw clenched. The engine roared beneath him. In the rear cage, Bravo, the K9 unit dog, barked relentlessly, trapped, confused, and agitated. Derrick didn't speak. He just drove. Behind him, sirens began to wail, a growing storm of red and blue lights closing in from multiple directions. The chase had officially crossed into multi-jurisdictional territory. Officers from Iron County, Sevier County, and the Utah Highway Patrol were coordinating in real time. Radios cracked and buzzed as supervisors scrambled to track the cruiser's location. "He's got Officer Hayes' unit," Sergeant Julian Beck confirmed through his comms. "K9 inside. Suspect possibly armed with department rifle. Extreme caution." In the passenger seat of another cruiser, Trooper Hayes could hardly sit still. He slammed his hand against the dashboard. "We've got to get that dog back." Beck nodded, gripping the wheel. "We will. Just hope Monroe doesn't figure out how to open that rifle lock." Inside the stolen cruiser, Derrick's eyes scanned the console, flicking between the speedometer and the unfamiliar buttons and switches. He wasn't just trying to escape anymore. He was calculating. Every second, every mile mattered. He'd never planned to run. Not like this. But now his fingerprints were all over the meth, over the gun, over a stolen police car. There was no more walking away. No more turning things around. His breath was heavy, his eyes bloodshot. In the corner of his eye, a black rifle case lay partially exposed beside the front passenger seat. Unlocked. Temptation whispered louder than reason. "Speed is over 110, still southbound on 202, the dispatcher relayed. "Requesting spike strip team at exit 144. On the highway's shoulder, officers prepared. A set of spike strips was laid out like a trap, just beyond a gentle bend in the road. If Derrick didn't notice them, this could end without bullets. But Derrick was watching. As he came around the bend, his eyes caught the glint of metal across the asphalt. Just a flash, but enough. He swerved hard to the left. The tires screamed as the cruiser veered into the gravel shoulder, narrowly missing the spike strip. Dust flew. Rocks pinged against the undercarriage. Then he jerked the wheel back and returned to the highway, tires digging in as the vehicle fishtailed and corrected. Behind him, officers cursed. He saw it. He's still going. Derrick could feel the tension shifting now. They wanted to end this quickly, but they also knew what was at stake. The K9 in the back, the rifle in the front. And now, Monroe had figured out how to disable the cruiser's radio. A few quick button presses, and he was a ghost on the airwaves. No more updates, no more listening in. Just him, the cruiser, and whatever came next. In the back seat, Bravo had gone quiet. The dog was crouched now, panting, reading the tension in the air. Derrick's fingers hovered over the rifle case. "I don't want to use it," he muttered under his breath. "But I will." As the miles passed, Sergeant Beck coordinated with air support. A DPS helicopter had been deployed and was now tracking the stolen cruiser from the sky. "He's approaching the 202-89 interchange," the pilot relayed. "No traffic at the junction. We can box him in if we time it right." Beck made a decision. "We intercept at the fork," he said. "Set up units at the east and south exits. Prepare for a potential shootout." Derrick approached the fork and made a split-second choice. He took the rural route off 202, merging onto a narrow two-lane road lined with low brush and occasional farms. Fewer cars, fewer eyes, maybe a chance to disappear. But the road curved sharply up ahead, and standing there were two patrol SUVs side by side, blocking the road. He slammed the brakes. Tires locked. The cruiser skidded sideways and came to a shrieking stop. Dust enveloped the vehicle. Inside, Derrick's pulse pounded. Through the windshield, he saw shapes moving. Officers taking cover, weapons raised. He looked over. The rifle case was open now. He reached for it. From a nearby ditch, Trooper Hayes watched the scene unfold. "I see movement. Driver's side. He's reaching." A split second later, gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the dust cloud. Derrick fired from inside the vehicle, his shots tearing through the front windshield, aimed toward the officer's cover. "Shots fired. Suspect is armed with the patrol rifle," the radio screamed. One officer returned fire, another repositioned, yelling for Derrick to surrender. But inside the cruiser, the war had already started, at least in Derrick's mind. He had no exit, so he'd chosen fire. Amid the chaos, the K9 cage door popped open, possibly damaged during the pursuit or from the jolt of braking. Bravo lunged forward, barking furiously, then retreated, panicked by the noise. "Hold your fire! K9 is still inside!" someone shouted. Derrick ducked and threw the rifle onto the passenger seat. He needed another escape. Then he saw it. A silver SUV slowly approaching from the side road. A civilian, probably unaware of the danger. Derrick flung the door open and limped toward it, rifle now slung in his arm. He raised the weapon and yelled, "Out of the car! Now!" The silver SUV slowed at the rural intersection, dust swirling beneath its tires. Inside, Alan Watkins adjusted his sunglasses and squinted ahead. "Looks like a crash," he muttered to his wife, Jamie, who sat beside him, scrolling on her phone. Jamie looked up. "Is that a police car?" Then they saw him. Derrick Monroe, blood on his pant leg, rifle in hand, moving fast and limping toward them with fire in his eyes. Alan's hands froze on the wheel. "Oh, God." "Out of the car!" Derrick shouted, his voice raw and shaking. "Now! Open the door!" Jamie gasped, her hand instinctively going to the lock button. "Alan, he's got a gun!" Derrick didn't wait. He reached the passenger side window, raised the stolen department-issued rifle and pointed it directly at Jamie's face. "You drive, or you both die," he barked, eyes wide, veins bulging at his neck. "I'm not kidding." Alan's mind raced. He couldn't just drive off with this man. He couldn't let him hurt Jamie. In a burst of adrenaline, he leaned across and swatted at the barrel of the rifle, knocking it slightly upward. The gun discharged. Bang! Glass shattered. Smoke filled the SUV. The bullet tore through the dashboard, sending fragments flying. For a split second, silence. Then Jamie screamed, clutching her leg. Blood seeped between her fingers. "Alan, he shot me." Derrick recoiled, surprised he'd actually fired. The car's OnStar system chimed loudly. "Emergency detected. Vehicle disabling." The SUV sputtered and stalled. Derrick cursed, pounding on the hood with the rifle. Alan, thinking only of survival, mashed the ignition. The engine groaned, then roared back to life. "Drive!" Jamie yelled through the pain. The SUV peeled away, tires screeching, leaving Derrick in the dust, limping and furious, rifle raised once more. He fired twice, missed both shots. The couple disappeared around the bend, smoke and fear trailing behind them. Back at the blockade, Trooper Hayes and Sergeant Beck were already on the move, flanking left around the cruiser. The sound of gunfire had rattled them, but training kicked in. "He shot at civilians," Hayes said, breathless over his radio. "He just tried to hijack an SUV. At least one victim hit, female. We need EMS rolling now. Suspect's limping, Beck added. Looks like he's favoring his right leg. Return fire may have connected. From above, the helicopter pilot confirmed. He's moving back toward the ditch, possibly retreating. Standing, now crawling. On the ground, the team advanced carefully. Guns raised, voices clear. Derrick Monroe! Drop the weapon! He's got the rifle. He's retreating behind the cruiser. Watch for crossfire. K9 still in the vehicle. Bravo's barking filled the air again, louder now, frenzied. A sharp pop of return fire sent officers ducking behind their units. Derrick had repositioned behind the patrol car, trying to hold his ground, but his leg was bleeding heavily now. Each movement came with a wince and a grunt. He looked at the rifle, at the dog, at the blood. He was losing. Fast. In the distance, civilian sirens wailed, an ambulance en route to pick up Jamie. The radio crackled. Alan and Jamie Watkins, civilian couple, female struck in leg. Not life-threatening, but bleeding significantly. They're safe. En route to hospital. It was the one sliver of good news anyone had heard all day. Hayes crept closer, behind the cover of a nearby fence post. He could see Derrick clearly now, sweating, struggling, ducking behind the stolen cruiser. Come on, man, Hayes muttered to himself. Just give it up. But Derrick wasn't done. With a final burst of strength, he limped across the road, rifle slung, disappearing into the dense brush leading toward a steep ravine. Suspect on foot, Beck called out. Heading southeast toward the river. He's wounded, bleeding from the leg. Officers, hold position. We need to regroup. The chase was entering its most dangerous phase. Don't follow him into that ravine, Beck warned. He knows we're close. He's got a weapon. Could be planning to ambush us. Within minutes, command ordered a full tactical response. The Utah SWAT team was activated. An armored Bearcat rolled in from the city. Officer Rachel Kim, recently flown in from Minnesota to testify in Derrick's earlier case, had joined the manhunt. She arrived just in time to see the tail end of the chaos, the wounded suspect disappearing into the trees and the tension settling over everyone like dust. Down in the ravine, Derrick moved with labored steps, the rifle dragging behind him, blood staining every other rock he touched. He wasn't thinking about where he was going anymore. Just away. Anywhere but here. His body wanted to collapse, but his mind refused. Back on the ridge, Trooper Hayes approached Sergeant Beck. We going in? Beck nodded grimly. We're not letting him slip again, but we're going smart. SWAT takes point. No one goes down that slope alone. Helicopters circled above, their rotors chopping through the silence like clock hands ticking toward the inevitable. Heat sensors scanned the forest floor, searching for the glow of a body. K9 units were deployed on the perimeter. The manhunt was tightening. Somewhere deep in the ravine, Derrick finally found a large tree by the riverbank. He slumped behind it, rifle across his lap, gasping. He looked at the blood on his hands, at the reflection of his face in the water. For the first time since it all began, he looked afraid, not of the cops, but of what he'd become. The sun was beginning to dip below the hills, casting long shadows across the landscape as the manhunt entered its most dangerous phase. Somewhere in the thick woods outside Richfield, Utah, Derrick Monroe limped deeper into the wilderness, his legs soaked in blood, his breathing ragged, and his stolen rifle now dragging beside him like dead weight. Every step sent fire shooting through his thigh. He could still hear the echoes of gunfire ringing in his ears. He didn't know if it was real or memory. He didn't care. He had one mission now: escape. Above the tree line, the low thrum of helicopter blades churned the sky. A state police chopper, outfitted with infrared and thermal imaging, was scanning the dense underbrush from above, tracing heat signatures that flickered like embers in the darkening forest. Back on the ridge, SWAT Commander Linda Zhao stood with her team beside the armored Bearcat. We're going in slow and deliberate, she told her squad. He's wounded, but he's armed and dangerous. Assume he'll shoot if cornered. Beside her, Officer Rachel Kim adjusted her vest. The adrenaline hadn't faded, not since the first report came through about the carjacking attempt, the wounded civilian, the police rifle in Derrick's hands. She'd faced danger before, but this was different. This wasn't just pursuit. It felt personal now. At the base of the ravine, Derrick stumbled into a shallow stream. He dropped to his knees, splashing cold water on his face, trying to stop the world from spinning. The weight of the rifle in his hands now felt absurdly heavy. He rested it across his lap, fingers trembling. For a brief moment, everything was still. Just the sound of water over rock, the distant hum of engines, and the ache in his body. He'd burned every bridge. There was no more running. But the idea of surrender twisted something deep inside him. He'd rather die here, cold, dirty, and alone, than go back in chains. Back at the command center, SWAT teams fanned out into the ravine, moving methodically, guided by aerial support. "We've got a weak heat signature by the riverbank," the helicopter operator radioed. "Could be him. No movement in the last 5 minutes." Zhao nodded. "Could mean he's down, or waiting." She motioned her team forward. "2 teams, east and west. Flank the river. Don't engage unless fired upon." Meanwhile, a new danger loomed. On the far edge of the search area, a silver pickup truck turned off a gravel road and began rolling into the woods. Inside, a man and his teenage son were out for an afternoon drive, completely unaware of the manhunt unfolding just beyond the trees. Officer Kim's radio buzzed. "Civilian vehicle just breached the outer perimeter. Repeat, unsecured civilians entering hot zone." Her heart skipped. "Number not now." She took off sprinting, motioning to a nearby deputy. "Cover me, I've got to redirect them." As she crested a small hill, she caught sight of the truck, and her worst fear. Derrick was just 50 yards away, barely hidden in the brush. If he saw them, if he thought they were another target. Kim raised her rifle and shouted, "Stop that truck! Get out! Back up!" The driver slammed the brakes. The engine idled as the confused man stuck his head out the window. "What's going on?" "Reverse! Now!" They did. Seconds later, Derrick stirred. The movement jolted him awake. He reached for his rifle, but not in time. A K-9 unit led by Sergeant David Mendez crested the opposite ridge, the dog straining at the leash. The second it caught Derrick's scent, it howled. "Target spotted," Mendez barked into his radio. "East Riverbank, armed suspect, no civilians in range." From above, the helicopter zeroed in. The red dot pulsed bright against the darkening ground. Zhao's voice crackled through the comms. "Move in. This ends now." The Bearcat rumbled into the ravine like thunder. Dirt flew. Branches snapped. Officers took position along the high ground. Rifles trained on the lone figure slumped against the river's edge. Through binoculars, Rachel Kim finally saw him. Derrick, exhausted, pale, blood caked down his leg. Still breathing, still holding the rifle. But something had changed. He wasn't trying to run. He wasn't aiming anymore. He was just sitting. "Derrick Monroe," Zhao called through the vehicle's loudspeaker. "This is your last chance. You're surrounded. Put the weapon down." Nothing. Her voice softened. "We don't want to hurt you. Put it down and come out. You're injured. You need help." Derrick looked up. The eyes that once burned with defiance now just looked tired, empty, like a man who'd finally come to the end of his road. With a groan, he pushed the rifle aside. It clattered on the rocks. His hands rose. Officers swarmed in, moving quickly but cautiously. No sudden movements, no mistakes. They cuffed him, searched him, then lifted him to his feet. Zhao stepped forward, her face unreadable. "You made it harder than it had to be," she said quietly. "But it's over now." Derrick didn't reply. He simply looked out across the river, breathing shallow, skin pale. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Should have died in the parking lot." Zhao's expression didn't change. "You didn't." Back at the roadblock, Rachel Kim watched the Bearcat emerge from the trees, its headlights catching the bloodied man inside. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Behind her, the K-9 unit barked once, sharp, alert. The danger had passed. It was nearly midnight when the news reached the hospital where Jamie Watkins was recovering. "He's in custody," Alan told her, voice hoarse. "They got him." Jamie nodded, eyes glassy. "Good." She looked down at her bandaged leg. It better be worth it. The morning mist curled low over the riverbank, softening the jagged rocks and broken branches where Derrick Monroe had made his last stand. He sat cuffed and slumped in the back of the Bearcat, barely conscious, blood drying on his jeans and arms. Paramedics were already waiting by the access road, and as soon as the armored vehicle rolled to a stop, they rushed forward. But Derrick didn't fight. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just closed his eyes, as if surrendering to gravity itself. SWAT Commander Linda Zhao stood nearby, arms crossed, watching as her team cleared their positions. No shots fired during the arrest. No one else hurt. That alone felt like a small miracle. Back at the temporary command post, Officer Rachel Kim sat on the tailgate of a patrol truck, silently removing her gear. Her vest, still heavy with sweat and adrenaline, thudded against the bed. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now, but they hadn't been earlier. Across from her, Officer Mark Ellison, the same officer who'd first encountered Derrick Monroe back in that Walmart parking lot, approached with 2 bottles of water and a tired smile. "Didn't think I'd be seeing him again," he said, handing one over. "Let alone chasing him through the damn wilderness." Rachel exhaled, half laughing. He got further than he ever should have. "Yeah," Mark said, eyes narrowing. "And he almost got someone killed in the process." They both looked toward the ambulance where paramedics tended to Monroe's gunshot wound. He was pale but conscious, his face unreadable as he answered their questions. Behind him, a state trooper stood guard. "Let's hope that's the last time he hurts anyone," Rachel muttered. Several miles away in a rundown motel on the outskirts of Richfield, Vanessa Cruz was pacing the floor of room 208. Her hands trembled as she peered through the blinds again, watching police cruisers and unmarked vehicles swarm the highway. She hadn't heard from Derrick in hours. No texts, no calls, just silence, and a rising dread in her chest. Then came the knock. 3 firm raps on the door. "Vanessa Cruz, State Police, open the door with your hands visible." She froze. Her mind raced. She thought about running, about flushing the stash of leftover pills, but there was no time. "Don't do anything stupid," a voice called through the door. "This is your only chance." The doorknob turned. Slowly, cautiously, she opened it. 2 officers stood with weapons drawn. One read her rights as the other cuffed her hands behind her back. And just like that, the second fugitive was in custody. Later that day, back at the Richfield precinct, Monroe was officially booked. His mugshot showed a man far older than 35, dark bags under bloodshot eyes, a grim set to his mouth, like he was already imagining concrete walls closing in around him. His charges were read out one by one: 4 counts of attempted aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, 1 count of aggravated robbery, and multiple firearms violations. The list went on: theft, possession of methamphetamine, resisting arrest, and failure to obey police commands. The bail hearing wasn't even discussed this time. He would not be walking free again. Meanwhile, Vanessa Cruz faced her own set of charges: aiding and abetting a fugitive, possession of controlled substances, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors were already drawing lines between her and the gun, the drugs, and the planning. Whether she'd known the full extent of Derrick's history didn't matter now. She sat in her holding cell later that evening, hugging her knees to her chest. That same night, Alan and Jamie Watkins were recovering in a hospital room 2 counties away. Jamie's leg was heavily bandaged, a clean bullet hole having torn straight through muscle and skin. A doctor assured her there would be no permanent damage, but the emotional wounds would take far longer to heal. "He had a rifle in my face," Jamie whispered to a local reporter days later. "And I really thought that was the end. If Alan hadn't knocked it aside." Her voice trailed off. Alan, sitting beside her, just shook his head. "That bullet hit our dashboard. And then her. It could have been so much worse." A week later, Commander Zhao, Officers Kim and Ellison and several others gathered in a conference room to debrief the operation. "We made mistakes," Zhao said honestly. "Let's not pretend otherwise." A few heads nodded. "But we worked together. No lives lost. And a violent fugitive is behind bars. That's not luck. That's teamwork." She looked around the room. And it's a reminder. Every call could turn into this. News of the arrest spread quickly. Local outlets picked up the story. Then national ones. A viral headline read, "Suspect who shot at police freed on bail. Leads officers on multi-state chase 1 year later." Comment sections exploded. Social media lit up. Detective Elaine Moore, who'd expressed concern about Derrick's release a year prior, gave a short statement to a reporter. "He never should have walked. Our justice system needs to protect the public. not play roulette with violent offenders. At the next court appearance, Derrick Monroe sat silently as the judge reviewed the charges. His lawyer requested leniency due to Monroe's gunshot injury and difficult background. But the judge didn't waver. Your actions endangered civilians, injured an innocent woman, and involved the theft of a police vehicle with a K-9 officer inside. You used lethal force against peace officers, not once, but twice. The sentence, 25 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. No possibility of parole before year 20. Back at the Brooklyn Park precinct in Minnesota, where it all began, Officer Ellison sat at his desk late into the night. He glanced over at the case file still open. The Walmart shooting, the bail release, the Utah chase. Full circle, he muttered. Outside the station, Officer Rachel Kim stood near her patrol car, watching a young K-9 unit run drills in the training yard. The same model of dog that Monroe had driven off with months ago, only this one was wagging its tail, chasing down a rubber toy. Kim smiled. Sometimes the story doesn't end with tragedy. Sometimes you catch the bad guy. Sometimes the dog comes home safe. And sometimes people live to tell the tale. She looked up at the sky, then turned toward the dark streets, ready for the next call. The courtroom was silent as the final gavel came down. 25 years in the custody of the state, the judge declared, his voice steady. With 5 additional years of supervised release. Case closed. Derrick Monroe stood motionless in the defendant's chair. His hands were cuffed, his expression unreadable. This wasn't the first courtroom he'd stood in, but it would likely be the last for a very long time. He was 35 now. He would be 60 before he tasted freedom again. Behind him, the courtroom slowly emptied. Reporters, attorneys, observers, each returning to their normal lives. But for those who had lived through the chaos he caused, normal would take longer to return. A few days later, Jamie Watkins limped up the steps of her front porch, her leg still healing. She paused to steady herself on the railing. Inside, her husband Alan sat on the couch, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Doctor says I'm healing well," Jamie said as she sat beside him. "Nerves are fine. No permanent damage." Alan gave a faint smile. "That's good." But they both knew the real damage wasn't in her leg. It was in the nights Jamie woke up screaming, still seeing that rifle barrel inches from her face. In the way Alan never quite left her side now, even when taking out the trash. In the silent tension every time they saw flashing lights or heard sirens nearby. "I can't believe he got out on bail," Jamie whispered, shaking her head. "I know," Alan replied. "He should have never had the chance to do what he did to us." They sat in silence for a long time, grateful to be alive, angry that it had come so close. Back in Minnesota, Detective Elaine Moore was typing up a department memo when her phone buzzed. "Did you see the sentencing?" the message read. "He's finally locked up." She stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Took long enough. Elaine had been one of the first to raise concerns after Monroe's Walmart shooting. She had urged the DA's office to resist bail, warned about the potential for further violence, but in an overwhelmed system, her voice had been one of many. It wasn't about pride. It was about safety. And the fact that Monroe had nearly killed officers and a civilian after walking free haunted her. At the Utah State Police Precinct, Officer Brandon Hayes stood beside the K-9 unit cruiser, the one Monroe had stolen nearly a year earlier. "Still can't believe he jumped in right in front of us," he said, rubbing his hand over the newly installed reinforced locks and camera mounts. Beside him, Sergeant Julian Beck nodded. "We got lucky. Could have lost the dog, could have lost people. Hell, we almost did." Hayes sighed. "We were trained for traffic stops, drug searches, but that day, that was war." "And we made it out," Beck said. "We didn't lose anyone." Hayes looked down. "Yeah, but one family almost did." In a small press conference held by the department, reporters gathered to hear from those involved. Officer Rachel Kim stepped to the microphone. Her words were brief, but firm. "We do this job knowing every stop could turn dangerous. But what happened here? It didn't need to happen. He should never have walked free after the first shooting." Behind her, images of Monroe flashed on a screen. his Walmart arrest, his mugshot, the wrecked squad car in Utah. Rachel continued, "This is about more than just one man. It's about how we handle violent offenders. It's about listening to the red flags." A pause. "And it's about protecting the people who risk everything to keep others safe." At the same time, Monroe's former accomplice, Vanessa Cruz, appeared in her own courtroom. Her attorney argued that she had been manipulated, that she hadn't known the extent of Monroe's record or plans. But prosecutors presented text messages, GPS data, and surveillance footage that painted a different picture. Vanessa had been more than a passenger. She was sentenced to 7 years for aiding a fugitive and possession with intent to distribute. She broke down in court, crying as she was led away. As spring turned to summer and the headlines moved on, the people involved quietly began rebuilding their lives. Jamie Watkins joined a victim support group. At first, she said nothing, just listened. But eventually, she stood up and told her story, about the bullet, about the fear, about the miracle that she and Alan were still alive. Others nodded. They understood. Detective Moore helped push for internal reforms, stricter bail guidelines for violent felons, cross-state data sharing on high-risk offenders. Her department adopted new tracking protocols for suspects with prior police assault charges. A drop in recidivism followed, one small change at a time. Back at the precinct garage, the K9 from the stolen cruiser, Bravo, ran drills under a clear blue sky. Officer Hayes watched him leap, bite, release, repeat. "He's still got it," he smiled. Bravo hadn't flinched once in the weeks after the incident, hadn't shown fear or trauma. He'd just waited to go back to work. A working dog, a quiet hero. And in a quiet office tucked away from the noise, Officer Rachel Kim sat typing up her final incident report. She finished it with a sentence that wasn't policy, but truth. Sometimes justice takes longer than it should, but when it arrives, it matters. And it reminds us why we keep showing up, even on the darkest days. In the end, it wasn't just training or tactics that brought this chaotic saga to a close. It was courage. The courage of officers who stayed calm under fire, of civilians who acted without hesitation, and of a K9 who stayed loyal in the face of danger. Derrick Monroe may have tried to outrun justice, but the bravery and unity of everyone involved ensured no life was lost, and that accountability would find its way. This story is a reminder. Sometimes the difference between tragedy and survival lies in the smallest moments, a second of hesitation or a spark of resolve. If you believe in real stories that show the power of resilience, teamwork, and truth, don't forget to like this video, share it, and hit the subscribe button so you never miss another story that matters. We've got more to tell, and you won't want to miss them.